So today I want to talk about the water crisis facing Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson, Mississippi is facing a water crisis from the exact same winter storm that took out the power grid in Texas. And I have not seen nearly the amount of attention focused on Jackson as I have on the state of Texas. So I thought it would be a good time to highlight the situation and talk about some of the issues that are specific to Jackson, Mississippi. So I'd like to cover this by first and foremost talking about the effects of the storm and the experience of people with the storm and how they are handling this immediate crisis. Then I'd like to address the long-term issues of infrastructure and piping that has been affecting Jackson, Mississippi literally for decades, that this is something that they should have been prepared for and weren't. And then I'd like to talk further about the racial disparity involved in all of this. Now, I want to remind people that this winter storm occurred on February 16th. So we're now dealing with a water crisis on March 3rd that is over 2 weeks in the making. And that is 2 weeks where people have not been with water in some instances. And that is absolutely atrocious. And we should keep that in mind when going into the full story. So, some preliminary details about Jackson, Mississippi and their crisis right now. The storm, which affected Texas and Louisiana, has caused over 80 water breaks throughout the city. The Public Works Director, Dr. Charles Williams, said that as of Monday, 50 have been repaired. More than likely, what that means is bandaid repairs, that they just got the thing patched up and didn't actually repair the system. It's unrealistic to assume that they would in such a short span of time, but those pipes are probably just as likely to break the next time a storm happens, because the problem with all of this infrastructure is when you have 80 breaks happening at once, that it really highlights the fact that the pipes themselves are having issues. And even having still 30 remaining water breaks is not fixing the system. The city of Jackson has been on a boil water advisory since February 23rd. Meanwhile, some residents are still experiencing little to no water pressure in parts of the city. Now, the city has taken donations in and has provided support to provide flushing water to residents and has continued distributing water bottles. However, in some areas, this has not been enough. The city of Jackson, I just want to point this out, is 82% black, and the majority of white residents live in a wealthier suburb to the north and east of the city. And as we will show, those residents have not really been affected by this disaster, and that represents a huge problem. Now, the water problem has been such a major fact of life in the state over the course of its history that there's actually shirts that are sold by a company that says, "Welcome to Boil Water Alert, Mississippi." That is how long that this has been a crisis. The fact is most people probably saw this storm and assumed that it was going to happen, that the water was going to be lost. The city claims that it needs more money, that it can't actually fix the damage, and that the pipes themselves are a long-term issue. So let's talk about what has actually been transpiring with people. Well, some Jackson residents were so desperate to find water to flush their toilets in the immediate aftermath that they actually were melting the snow around them. They would literally go out and collect the snow and bring it into their homes to use as flush water for their toilets. And that is kind of ridiculous when you think about it, that they have to go to that extent, but it also shows a level of ingenuity that they were able to do that, and they knew to do that. And, it speaks to having an understanding of the crisis and what you have available to you, and I actually applaud that for the residents, although it's really not something that I should even have to be talking about or applauding in the first place. And it's this weird perspective where I'm glad they found a solution, but the city should have already fixed the piping and had things in place to prevent that from even happening. Now, many people in the city, can't actually go out and get water or even arrive at the distribution centers. The citizens who are most vulnerable, usually the elderly, people who are disabled, people who just can't get out of their homes for one reason or another, not even mentioning the virus and the fact that if you have a population that is at risk for the virus and has not been vaccinated, then they are at risk going out to distribution centers, which have a large amount of people gathering. This represents a huge problem. And you can see on screen, somebody had an image of their bathtub literally filled with water buckets. And as somebody pointed out, we can't bathe in this because if there's microbes in the water, they can enter your mouth, your eyes, and your nose, and you can't wash dishes because you don't want to ingest it that way. So essentially, all the water has to be boiled. All of the water is suspect coming through the pipes right now because we don't know if any of the water's clean. And this is an issue that tends to affect a lot of areas with, primarily people of color in this country. I think back to Flint, Michigan, which is still dealing with water issues, even though they've claimed that, the cities claim that it's mostly clean. Not everyone agrees on that. And, it's representative of the way capitalism is functioning, that we don't prioritize the fixing of these pipes, that we don't prioritize the way this is being handled. And, people ahead of time were, filling up their bathtubs because they knew such an event would happen. And that represents the fact that this is a much wider issue and a much more systemic issue than just one storm messing things up. We have here that a person worried her pipes might freeze. They filled their bathtub in case of such an event. Unfortunately for her and thousands of others, the unseasonably frigid weather caused the city's outdated water equipment, which can't handle wintry conditions, to freeze and the water lines to burst. Williams had said that the next 10 days with no running water in her home, she bought water whenever she could, shelling out $100 on bottled water to cook with and clean with. Now, I need to remind people that we are in a pandemic where we are dealing with an economic crisis where people are desperate and need money from the government and are begging practically for money from the government for stimulus checks because they can't pay their bills because they're choosing between food, medicine, and rent, and everything has gone awry. And now you're asking people in these communities to shell out $100 on bottled water to cook and clean with. That does not allow for people to actually survive in these conditions. Where is the relief for all of this? Where is the defense of people? People are struggling out there. And the fact that this person thought to fill their pipes, their tub up and fill up buckets, and I'm sure a lot of other people have done this, represents a wider issue. They knew this storm would damage the water pipes. And as we see, part of the problem is that everywhere, usually we have an outage and it's in one neighborhood. So people are used to running over to their friend's house or their auntie's house to take a shower or fill up some jugs. Usually you can grab your buckets and find some place to fill them. Whatever. But when it's the whole damn city, where are black people supposed to go? It's not like this is everywhere. It's mostly the black population in Jackson lives. And we know that because the predominantly white area was left unscathed. The rich suburbs to the northwest parts of Jackson, Mississippi were largely unaffected by the storm. Their pipes were fine. Their pipes were maintained. So this is an issue of class, this is an issue of race, and this is an issue of capitalism and white supremacy coming together in a way that is creating structures and systems that disproportionately affect poor and people of color. Poor people and people of color. This type of issue, this right now I have on screen a image of the actual water distribution schedule and how to get water and everything like that. But this issue, as the governor has pointed out, is 50 years of negligence and ignoring the challenges of the pipes and the system. But there's no incentive to fix the pipes. It's cheaper to just put a patch on it, to put another thing, and to prepare for it the next year. And as we saw, as was quoted, you're used to one neighborhood going out every now and then. A pipe bursting here, a pipe bursting there. You put another patch on it, another Band-Aid, and you go out and you deal with it. And if city residents in Jackson are used to this, this neighborhood that, again, is primarily black, that has a large amount of poor people. I think the poverty rate is somewhere in the range of 26% from what I was reading. And, you can't even talk about how this is a problem that is separate from capitalism, because where is the incentive? What really needs to happen is those pipes and that infrastructure need to be repaired. And you want to talk about jobs that would actually make a difference in the country. That is the type of jobs the federal government needs to be putting in. All of the infrastructure needs to be replaced. We need to start creating systems to do this. And the government, isn't doing it. The state of Mississippi isn't advocating for it. The city of Jackson isn't advocating for it. The federal government isn't advocating for it. And the only thing I can think of is the people actually coming together and doing this and rising up together. Because really, these systems need to be completely overhauled and replaced. And the only thing I can think of as a long-term solution to this is people running in and going and taking over the city government and just doing things. Because at the end of the day, this represents a systemic problem that's much wider than just Jackson, Mississippi. And to be honest, these types of water issues are affecting a good chunk of the areas that did not have power during the storm. Texas is having some water crisis issues. Louisiana is having some water crisis issues. And I guarantee you that if I looked into it, that it would probably be primarily poor areas and primarily the areas of people with large concentrations of people of color that are being affected. Because at the end of the day, capitalism doesn't care. The state and government doesn't care. And we really need to come up with a system that works. And without moving further left, without coming up with more communalistic understandings of repair and dealing with needs of people on the ground in situations, we're going to keep seeing this. And again, capitalism keeps being highlighted as the culprit. Every single time we have a disaster. Disasters highlight every single issue of capitalism. You want to talk about the systems of racism and oppression that are inherent to the white power structure in the United States? Find any disaster and see who it affects. You want to find out about the level of class, analysis and all that and how it affects things? Look at a disaster and see which groups of people it affects. Every single time, it highlights the inequalities of our country. It highlights all of the problems inherent in the system. And until the system either is completely reformed and changed, or completely abolished and redone, we will keep having these crises. We will keep putting band-aids on wounds, and nothing will actively get fixed. People should not have to fill their bathtubs every time a storm approaches, being fearful of the fact that they are not going to have water in the coming days. People should not have to go to their neighbor's house to get water. People should not be in a place in the wealthiest country in the world where they have to boil water to drink it, and not even have access to water in certain moments. We have the infrastructure. We have the capital. There are billionaires with so much wealth and status and money, and we can't figure out a way to do this. We have a military-industrial complex that gets billions and billions of dollars every single year, where they can buy fighter jets and everything else, and we can't afford to get water into people's homes? This is absurd. What are we defending? What are we protecting? What even is the point of the state and government at this point, when it can't seem to function in any way that actually helps people? So with that said, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and bell for notifications. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my Discord in the description down below. My name is Anarchist Tara, and I hope you enjoyed watching.